belting out of tune, and then all of you will cringe. God has given me many gifts. Being on key is not one of them, as we'll see later. So 2 years ago, I played the day after Halloween Jimmy Kimmel prank on our children. I'm not proud of it. I just really wanted to see how they would react. For those of you who are not familiar with Jimmy Kimmel and you haven't seen all the YouTube videos, this prank is where the parents confess to their children the day after Halloween, November 1st, that during the night they became hungry and couldn't control themselves and ate all of the Halloween candy that their children had worked so hard to get while trick-or-treating the night before. Both of the girls happened to be in Michaela's room when I came in to fess up. Little Gabby responded immediately in her sweet voice. "That's okay, Mama. I still love you." Our older child, on the other hand, well, let's just say I didn't know that kind of rage dwelled within her. Even after I explained I was joking, I even showed her videos of other parents doing this to them, and I showed her her bucket full of candy. She still would not come out of her room or speak to me for 2 hours. I have never felt so badly about pulling a prank or a joke in my life. Well, this year, it was a different story. The girls had been anticipating trick-or-treating for weeks in advance. And the night of, they gathered with their friends and ran as quickly as they could from house to house. We all were laughing because little Gabby, no one had ever seen her run so fast in her life. She was leading the pack. All for the love of candy. Well, as the night went on, they slowed down a bit, maybe partially because their buckets were getting heavier and heavier. Michaela decided at one point that she wanted to spread her wealth. And so she started doling out candy to her father and her grandparents and to me as we walked. She loved us and wanted to share with us, but also it made her basket lighter and there was room for more candy. Gabby followed suit. Well, a couple days later, I was picking them up after school and they were in the back seat and I'm listening to their conversation. And they were talking, comparing notes about how much candy they had because they had counted every last piece. And then somehow the conversation turned. I'm not sure who said it first, but one of them said, "I can't wait to get home. I want to give Mommy a piece of my candy because I love her." The other child, not to be outdone, wanted to give me 2 pieces of their candy. And in true sibling competition, it went 10, 20, up to 100. I'm pretty sure by the time we pulled in the driveway, they both had pledged all of their baskets full of candy to me. And I hadn't asked for any. And then throughout the week, every day, they have tried to give me candy. And if I didn't want it, it was almost as if I was hurting their feelings. This is a far cry from slamming doors and when they thought I took their candy without permission. When we love someone, we want to share our bounty with them. It brings us joy. It makes us happy to make them happy. But not so much if we feel we have to give out of expectation or obligation. And if we're giving because we think that we will gain something in return, we will never be able to fill that void. This is true of Halloween candy. And it was true that day that Jesus was sitting across from the treasury in the temple. Jesus was watching the scribes showing off, strutting their stuff. The scribes were those who could read and write, but they were also often thought of as biblical scholars. Regularly, they were the ones who were challenging Jesus on just about everything. The reputation that the scribes had in that day and time in history might be comparable to how we might trust used car salesmen, or politicians, or lawyers today. Now, are all used car salesmen and politicians and lawyers dishonest? Certainly not. Many, many, many of them work for the greater good and for justice in this world. But just enough have been shady that it has tainted the reputation of those professions, so that others of us might be a little bit skeptical as to their intentions or ethical standards. The scribes that Jesus was watching in the temple that day, they were the shady sort. They wanted everyone's attention. They wanted everyone to envy them. And they wanted everyone to notice just how much they were giving to the treasury. Now, in that culture, women were not allowed to manage whatever had been left to them by their deceased husbands. So it was often scribes who would serve as trustees for those funds. Scribes who were notorious for embezzling. It was disgusting. It is quite possible that much of that money that the scribes were putting into the treasury wasn't even theirs. And then we meet this widow who has basically nothing. When her husband died, she could have gone back to live with her family if they could or would pay for her. Otherwise, she would be forced to stay with her husband's family, and most likely given menial jobs to earn her keep. Whatever her husband had left, if it was much of anything at all, had been taken from her. Mercifully, in ancient Israel, the poor, and especially the widows, were not expected or required to give anything to the temple. But this widow, she had a great love of God. And she believed in the good of the temple. And so she wanted to be part of something bigger than herself. And she gave all she had. That is much more than a tithe. It isn't 10%, it's 100%. But even though it was 100%, it was barely anything at all. It was like a penny that we might not bother to stoop down to pick up off the ground. But Jesus didn't seem to be concerned with how much anyone was giving. He didn't seem so concerned with what percentage anyone was giving. He seemed more to notice how they were giving. Now, the Greek word for sin is related to a word for archery, and it means to miss the mark. We might strive to tie the full 10% so that we don't miss the mark and sin. But the Hebrew word for sin is about damaging and breaking relationships. And that is the word that Martin Luther focused in on when he described sin as being curved in on oneself. Our offering is about a relationship with God. God has already given us 100%. All that we possess already belongs to God. Jesus has given us 100% of himself in his death and resurrection. How we respond with our time, our talents, our offering is a reflection on our relationship with God. It's not about giving a certain amount or a certain percentage so that we don't miss the mark. It's about giving with joy. When we are sorting through our Halloween candy, or whatever it is that we think that we have worked hard to earn on our own, we will find that when we offer what we have been given, not because we feel obligated to or out of guilt, but out of joy, responding with love to the one who loves us first and best, we will find that our burden is lighter. And we will see that there is room where we will now be able to witness that God does and will provide for our needs. Amen.